So we can start, and we wanted to also let you know right at the beginning that we have to change the date of the next meeting. Usually we always meet on the third Thursday of every month. But this time it coincides with a national holiday here in Austria. So we are planning to meet on November 2nd. So we may have 2 meetings in November, but we can't meet the third one in September. So please make a note of that. Okay, so I'm very pleased to welcome you all to our 10th panel, Psychoanalysis Under Conditions of War, a series that has been made possible through the collaboration of the Freud Museum, Vienna, the US Freud Foundation, the cooperation between Oleksandr Filts, chief psychiatrist at the Danylo National Medical University in Lviv, and our consulting team, Françoise Davoine, psychoanalyst and eminent author from Paris, France, and Jerry Fromm, psychoanalyst from the Erikson Institute at Austen in Massachusetts, USA, and also the author of many books and articles. Both have extensively written on war and trauma, and also on the transmission of trauma for ensuing generations. This international cooperation, sometimes stretching from California and maybe today even from Mexico to the Ukraine, would also not be made possible if it were not for Oksana Lizak's professional, clear, and always very patient translation from Ukraine into English. I also want to thank at this point the whole team, including Peter Neumeier and Eva Klein-Schwärzer, for making this series possible. Over this last year, beginning in May 2020, we've had a number of very different cases presented to us. Soldiers coming from the front, soldiers who have been tortured, ordinary citizens, men and women and refugees who have been treated by fellow refugees outside their common homeland. Okay, good. Okay. Each case presented to us has posed particularly challenges and questions, demanding each time a finely adjusted and attuned response to the clinical problem at hand. With each case presentation, we have learned something anew, accumulating a commonly threaded knowledge as we move from region to region, from Kiev to Donetsk, from Kherson to Kharkiv, and back to Lviv, to listen to different therapists and analysts working under conditions of this terrible and brutal war. We've all noticed an immense ingenuity on the part of our Ukrainian colleagues to think in the moment and to come up with ideas and suggestions to their deeply traumatized patients as they work with them in the trenches, the hospitals, or makeshift shelters. As one of our presenters, Alexander Fedoret's pithily stated during one of his presentations was, within the chaos and within the utter brutality of war, there seem to be islands left where two people can find momentarily a bit of humanity again, even it is only for 2 hours of therapy. That is the importance of our work nowadays. The function of time and the function of time and the function of bearing witness are key concepts that have emerged from our discussions over and over again. Time stands still when trauma happens, says Françoise Davoine, and it is often the hazard or the coincidence that commences a new counting of time. Since time is out of joint, it is the analyst who has to construct a flexible but not rigid frame, adjusting to the circumstances of the moment in order to help the injured patients to attach to something in the present, which can give them a time of reference again. Survivors of massive trauma cannot endure the regular frame of the analytic setting, nor the neutral and abstinent stand of the analyst. They would experience such an analytic attitude with contempt and fail to engage in the therapeutic process. feeling left abandoned by the therapist, argued Jerry Fromm. At the beginning of our series, we primarily listened to cases from the front, soldiers coming back, emotionally and physically injured by the war. But as we progressed throughout the months, more women came into the picture. Women hiding in cellars for months, women having fled the Ukraine and being treated outside their homeland by fellow Ukrainian therapists. And today we will be hearing again a case of a woman who has left her child behind in the Ukraine, fleeing herself to Poland. Our presenter will be Nadia Bartnowska. She's a clinical psychologist, a Gestalt therapist, and she's working in Lviv at the neonatal center. But as I do each time in my role as a moderator, I will provide you with just a very short summary of the case we heard last time, presented by Oleg Beretsyuk back in June. So we've been bridging 3 months at this point. In this way, I hope to provide a link, a memorial chain of sorts between our different sessions during these disruptive times. Oleg treated a 59-year-old woman who had been hospitalized with a plethora of physical symptoms, which prevented her from walking and from functioning in daily life. When Oleg inquired about her history, especially about her flight from Kharkiv to Lviv, the patient became irate, admonishing him for asking such a difficult question and telling him, I quote her, he had no right to ask such a question. She made those accusations in Russian after she had initially spoken in Ukrainian. Oleg very sensitively took the bait and continued to speak with her in Russian, inquiring about other things about her life, in particular about her previous professional life. He said, I don't want to know you just as a patient, but also as a person and as a professional. This intervention, I believe, and his willingness to continue speaking in Russian, the enemy's language, of course, paved the way for a more peaceful conversation between the two and led to an eventual unlocking of a hidden traumatic history. Over just a span of 3 sessions, an intermittent EMDR session, the patient was able to walk again and finally recounted the story of her life and her escape from Kharkiv. In the end, we found out that she had also been affected by the transmission of generational trauma in her early life and had reenacted in part another flight and abandonment when she left behind her adult son in the Donbas region in Donetsk. With the beginning of the war, she was no longer allowed to, her son was no longer allowed to leave that region, working as a medical doctor in the Russian-occupied part of the Ukraine. She can no longer have any contact with him. We began to understand her somewhat defiant use of the Russian language, which made her look and sound as an enemy in the Lviv hospital. She had a very unpleasant encounter with a nurse there. We understood it both as a cover and an identification with the son whom she had left behind. Her bodily symptoms, the not walking, had thus provided her with a refuge that prevented her from moving, from eventually going back to a dangerous territory. So the key points we took away, and I really shortened a very lengthy and very interesting discussion, that we took away from this discussion was, 1, the complex interrelationship between Russian and Ukrainian language. The language which was once considered the mother language has now become the language of the aggressor. 2, the importance of that moment when the therapist takes on the aggression of the patient and does not shy away from enduring being the aggressor in the transference relationship. It's a point that Françoise always points to, and we have called it at times the Mengele moments. And 3rd, the effect of the transmission of trauma upon this woman and the repetition of abandonment and flight in her own life as a partial acting out of her own childhood history in the here and now. But now let us turn to another case, which also I am belief has at its core a mother's abandonment of her child. Please welcome Nadia Bartnowska. Thank you. You want to go, Nadia?
Hello, everyone. I prepared a case that I was struck by it. I would like to share it with you. I would like to respond to a story. And I would also like to allow space for some reflections that may come up. Okay, a case of one woman. This woman came to a perinatal center in the big city in the rear, and she told her doctor she was pregnant, and it was her first visit with this pregnancy. She has very limited time. She only has 10 days to deliver, and then she has to go back to Poland because that's where her elder son is left with strange people. She knows that she has a window of life that there's a window of life in our center, and she wants to leave her baby there. She was examined by a gynecologist. Her pregnancy was confirmed. She was referred to ultrasound and to a consultation to a clinical psychologist, and that would be me. And after her ultrasound, her baby size was corresponding to the gestation period. There was an abnormality in her fetus. 2011, she had a miscarriage, and then she had in 2014, she had a C-section and she gave birth to a live baby, and now it's her third pregnancy. I saw a young, tired woman dressed in a t-shirt, oversized t-shirt and jeans, and carrying a traveling backpack. She looked desperate, and she spoke in a literary Ukrainian, and her speech was a little slow. I thought that she talked like a person who studied a Ukrainian language as an adult. We have a problem. As if she was translating in her head. Because if it was her mother tongue, she would have an accent or a dialect. She spoke quietly, as if she didn't care for her words to be heard and understood, but to just let go of this story that brought her so much suffering. And her voice was shaky. Sometimes she would break into tears. It was not sobbing. It was really quiet. And she said, I'm here to give birth and leave this baby. I have no other options. But I contradicted that there were always other options. She could leave the child here, but she didn't have to do that. You don't have to carry it through the yard. You can leave it right where you give birth and just refuse the child. You can stay with this child in a shelter for mothers in adversity here in our country, or you can take your child to Poland. There are always more options than just one, she said. I thought about that too, that they may not notice the child in the window of hope right away. Maybe the baby will have to stay there for some time and catch a cold. And if I give up my baby, I wonder if people in my hometown would know. I said that probably not, but but you have to ask someone who knows for sure. And I asked her where her home was. And she said, I don't even know anymore. My village is on the Dnieper bank, and and it's been occupied from the start of the full-scale invasion. I thought it was my home before, and now I don't know anymore. And I asked her, and your baby is yet to born, has a father, and both parents have to make such an important decision. And that's where she started sobbing, and she couldn't hold back her tears anymore. And I didn't stop her. I told her she didn't have to tell me about it if she didn't feel like it, and that it's okay to cry in that situation, and I will just be next to her. And if I can help her, she should let me know. When she stopped crying, I suggested she use the breathing relaxation technique, and we breathed together for about 7 minutes, and we would go back to that technique every now and then. And we had during our sessions, and we had 5 of them, and I hope she's still using that technique. Okay, then she continued. And she said, I don't know the father. He's a Russian soldier, and they were always there in our village, and they change. There are different people. Some of them don't hurt us, but they shoot at the opposite bank from our at our territory. They're not people, they are beasts. And she cried again. And some of the local girls tries to steer clear of them, and that some would go to have fun with them. But I didn't want that to happen. They told me not to dress well, not to attract attention, but I was just going to the shop. I was wearing old jeans and old coat when he grabbed me and dragged me to the house, and she started crying again. Did you tell anyone about that? No, nobody knows about that. When I realized I was pregnant, at first I froze. I thought it was a bad joke. I thought that this could not have happened to me. I stopped eating, sleeping. My relationship with my son changed. I didn't talk much to him. I didn't pay much attention to him. But everyone was shocked in the village because of the war, and everyone has their own grief. My sister, at the start of the invasion, she left, she went towards Russia, away from the front line. And I thought it was my duty to stay with my mother and support her, but now that was not possible either. I felt well in my village. I was a teacher at the school, and I divorced my first husband, and I'm not in touch with him. I don't know where he is, and it was fine with me. I didn't even have a passport to go abroad. But our other teachers just, I just went along with other teachers and made myself a passport. I never was abroad, and I didn't want to go there. I didn't plan to go abroad. I felt well in my village, but until the war is over, I'm not going back. And I don't even know if I'll go back afterwards. I'm really afraid that someone will learn about this child of mine. When my stomach started swelling, I was tying it up, and then I couldn't, it didn't help anymore. I just couldn't stay there anymore. So I had to leave, because we could not go to the controlled territory of Ukraine. I had to go to Russia, and I had to pass the block posts. And the problem in Crimea, that's where I started having problems, because the soldier was looking at me intently, was searching my phone, asking where the father's child was. And I was scared because I thought he meant the father of my unborn child. And I was thinking about how he had learned, and my older son didn't know anything about that. And I was in a really stupid situation. But then I realized that he meant my older son. Let's call him Dmitro. I was relieved. I just have to say that she has a Polish surname. Then she took a ferry to go to Russia, and she stopped there in some cities for weeks, for days and weeks, because she had to plan her route. Sometimes she could work a little to make some money. And then we went through Belarus and the Baltic states, and we went to Poland and stopped in a small town. I was lucky to meet some good people. I found a cheap apartment, and the landlord has a small business making plastic goods, and he gave me a job there. And I said, well, this can be harmful. And nobody knew that I was pregnant, neither did the landlord. And my belly kept swelling, and I kept tying it up. And my son started noticing something when I was coming out of the shower. And I explained to him that I gained a little weight, although I didn't have any appetite at all. So we spent 2 months like that, and we settled. And then I had to go somewhere to give birth. I couldn't give birth in Poland because my landlord would find out. I read on the internet about your maternity center, and the main thing that there's a window of hope here. And you know my story now. I really can't accept this baby. I feel nothing to her, towards her or her father. And I told her that she had to think about her delivery, and then she could make a decision. By the end of the session, I suggested a few questionnaires, and she agreed to fill them in. And when I worked on the results, it turned out that her relationship, her attitude towards her pregnancy and delivery, I found out she was distancing. It was hyponosognostic type, 8 points. It's characteristic of women who do not accept their pregnancy, whether it's conscious or not. When the woman ignores the pregnancy manifestations, and her stomach size does not correspond to the term, so her stomach is smaller, and she also she has more important thing to do in her opinion, and the main feeling is disgust towards the baby. She perceives the baby as a threat and perceives them as a burden, and she wants to get rid of her baby, but due to various reasons, she does not do it. It's also a result of massive psychological trauma, and often is accompanied with depression. Okay, 11 points on depressive type and 5 points on anxious type. I'm not going to get into detail, and 0 points in optimal type. She had no healthy feelings towards the baby and herself as the child's mother. According to Edinburgh's scale of depression, she had 27 points out of 30. And she said yes to, I thought about hurting myself. Yes, really frequently. And when I asked her in the next session what she meant, she said that suicide would have been a good and easy solution in her situation, but she was not going to do it because she had to take care of her older son. And we also did the abridged version of the MMPI, and the results were the following. It was a sthenoneurotic type of personality. Depression scale was 80 points. So that's severe depression. And the scale of lie was 38. And the scale of correction was 40, and that meant that the data was valid. So she was hospitalized to the pathology department to undergo necessary tests and get prepared for C-section. Because her first delivery was also C-section. And we also had our next sessions in the department. She was in a general ward with 3 more women. And her neighbors' pregnancies were really desirable, and they were actively discussing partners' delivery, and I asked her how she felt about that, because those women had slightly different plans for the future. And I said, it's okay. She said, it's okay. I lied that my husband was in the war and couldn't come. And we decided, we discussed the results of her tests. I recommended a consultation of psychiatrists, and she agreed, but that was going to be after her delivery. So her C-section was successful, and the child was transferred to the ICU. And the child had hair lip and split palate. And next day her mood went down. She didn't have a good night's sleep. And when I came, I found her crying in her ward. And she was ending up in the reality, and her anesthesia was going away. And I asked her if she had gone to see her baby, and I told her that she still could change her decision, and also she could name her baby, and the name could be or could not be changed. She said that her decision was not changed, and she said that she was getting medication to stop lactation. And we decided this was the best solution of all the bad solutions, and that it's good that she had given birth to this boy, because his disability was not that bad and he could make some parents happy. He needed a 2-stage surgery when he grew up and became stronger, and we also had a good professional in our city who could take care of that. We breathed together, and then for some time we just fell silent. Okay, the 10th day was the day of her dismissal. She had a ticket, a bus ticket. All we had to do was to settle her paperwork, and that was another ordeal for her. Because when someone gives their baby up, social services are invited and police officers, and they have to sign the refusal act, and also it has to be signed by the medical personnel. I met her in the hallway, and I met them in the hallway and told the story of the patient briefly, and they were really amazed, and because they deal with human suffering and trauma very often, but they were really amazed by that story, but none of them showed any judgment. They just showed sympathy, and they were sad and angry, but that was not at her. It was at the war, and at someone who had permitted themselves to use their brutal violence and use it as a means of victory, quote unquote, over someone who's unarmed and weaker. When everyone left, I remained in the ward with her, and she started packing hastily. And she told me she couldn't stay there any longer. She just wanted to leave right away. And I took great effort to ask her to stay a while for me to finish my business, because we had a psychiatrist consultation planned for that day. I was really worried about her because I hadn't seen her so distraught. I was thinking that she didn't have a place to go. She could get lost in a strange city. And she cried, and we breathed again. But she promised that she was going to wait for me, and she kept her promise. And when I came to her ward, I took her backpack and we went to the psychoneurological clinic. She was examined there by a psychiatrist. I'm sorry, we're having. And she got treatment. I ran to the drugstore to get her medication because we had very little time until her bus departure. I gave her the contacts of a Polish migration forum. It's an organization that provides professional psychological help, but in her case, it was only available online because in the small town she lived in, they didn't have any representatives. I also gave her the contacts of our Polish colleagues, psychotherapists. And then we went to the railway station, and the street we followed showed a clear view of the hospital, the children's hospital. And I told her that probably in this hospital, her child was going to be operated on after he gets better. And she smiled and said, I've been thinking about that. I thought that nobody would want him because of his disability, and then someone called her on the phone and she said that she was going to make the bus, but she couldn't talk at the moment. And she explained me, although I didn't ask her, that it was her acquaintance who would be expecting her on the other side of the border with her car. And so we just went to the bus station. And when the bus was leaving, the sirens went off. On the way home, I thought for a long while about everything. But actually, I thought about that multiple times. Okay, split palate, the unacceptance of by the woman of something that she had never wanted, but she wanted to just express her disagreement in a different way, and the nature found a way. And a man who can correct that disability, and a couple of young or not so young people who will be happy to accept the child. And the sisters that were on the different sides of the front line, and the mother at the side of hostilities. And I hope they can meet each other again in a safe place. And this split world that had taken up the weapons again, interfering in changing fates of peaceful people. And who's the good man who can fix this abnormality? And she wrote to me, said that her trip went well. She was tired, but she was really glad to hug her son. It was the first time that they parted for 10 days. And in 2 weeks, I wrote to her myself and asked how she felt and whether she had addressed psychologists. And I will quote you her reply. It's been a week. I've been thinking of writing to you. I feel better, but I'm still on sick leave because I don't have enough strength to go to work. I go for walks with my son, but not for a very long time. I take medication, they seem to be blocking my emotions because I cannot cry. I'm sad, I'm worried, but I don't cry. My sleep became better. I only wake up once at night, but my appetite is not so good, maybe because of the heat. I had not contacted the psychotherapist. I'm ashamed and I'm shy of that. Could you tell me, maybe you know what is happening with the baby? I told you I didn't, and that was the truth because I was on holiday at that time. Because usually the children get transferred to the children's home after they don't need medical help anymore. She said, I keep thinking about him. And I told her, just wish him luck and meet good people in her life. And she said she was doing exactly that every night. She even went to church, but it won't let her go. She said everything was still very fresh, and this was all she could do at that moment. She thanked me. And last week I wrote back to her and asked how she felt and whether she was taking medication and if she had turned to mental health professionals and how her son was doing because he started school in a new school. And she replied that everything was fine, that her child was at school and she was still on sick leave. She was examined by a gynecologist. He said everything was fine, but it was still too early to go to work. I finished taking my medication. I feel better, but sometimes I have bad dreams. I didn't go to the migration forum because I was ashamed. I started roller skating with my son. We went to a forest gathering mushrooms. I also have support from the local man. He really likes me and he helps me a lot, but I'm not ready to enter a relationship yet. And when I was preparing this presentation, I went to the post-ICU because I know that after the ICU, the boy was transferred to that department. And I wanted to find out what was happening with him. So everybody knows him, knew him there and remembered him because he was different than other patients. He was really fussy. And when he was hungry, he was crying really loudly. Because the children in that ward are usually frail and their crying is quiet. And he was yelling like a wild animal. And he looked like a Burat, and his physician even searched the web about the size of the head of that nation, but she didn't find anything. He was pale and light eyes and dark eyes. And the doctor thought that some of the things that happened to the baby were due to her wrapping her stomach and not eating well. And the child was dismissed in 2 weeks, not because he still needed medical help, but because there was a delay in preparing his papers. Okay, and he was diagnosed with a neurological diagnosis, cerebral depression, and a split lip and split palate on one side. He was dismissed at 2 months, weighing 6 kilos, and he was born weighing 3 kilos, 400 grams. And I also learned that one couple was really interested in the boy and were intending to adopt him. Well, actually, that's the whole story, and I thank you for your attention.
I think there's a lot of weight in the word of whole story. It's an unbelievable story. Thank you very much for presenting it to us. I know that I have no words right now. I just find it horrific and very, very sad. So I don't know how, Françoise, whether you're ready to say something, or Jerry.
I can say something.
Good. And I just wanted to let you know I've also, especially for this session, invited some friends and colleagues who are working and have been working with tiny babies, such as Angela Sauer and Gertrude Diem-Willes. So I hope you also will join the discussion. So Françoise, go ahead.
I was struck by the last sentence. There are people waiting to adopt him, which was not precluded by the beginning of the story, the rape, the total loneliness, even from her family, neighbors, and the village which disappeared. She has no more home. And the shame and the secret, all that pregnancy in a total solitude. As soon as you get into contact with her, there is a chance. She can after the delivery, she tells you she cares about. She does not feel. It's contradictory. At the same time, she doesn't feel like a mother. She doesn't feel about this baby, but she cares. She thinks about a good person to operate this baby. And you talk to her about that. There is a window of hope for this little one, which is completely improbable, which was not at all predictable at the beginning. I speak with a background of I don't take care of babies, but I have in supervision analyst who works in Paris with abandoned children in public places, she works in the line of Françoise Dolto, who created the place for analysts with totally abandoned children. And she takes care of those little ones, some months, who are yelling like beasts, like you say, or who are completely or withdrawn and so on. And she tells them the story, although they are 2 or 3 months. And then there is another there. You stood for another in a realm where there is no otherness at all for her. You were the one. And you did a wonderful job because you allowed her to some future thinking. Of course, she was worried about her son over there, but even this little one, she worried about what would happen. And thanks to your, I could say, presence and your not feelings, what you told her, well, how you stayed there in spite of all the negative and brutality and the war and the torture of that woman. You were there. And like Oleksandr said, you are not a psychoanalyst, but you are a Gestalt psychologist, but that was psychoanalysis. This presence, and this, and I will stop there so that Jerry can say, but I was very struck that she could write to you. She didn't look for other therapists or anything, but you were the one that she related to, and she could address and tell what's going on afterward. That's not evident. That was not at all evident at the beginning. So I stop there for other. So I don't ask you questions for
Thank
the
you.
moment.
Thank you, Françoise. Jerry, what are
Sure.
your thoughts?
Well, you know, I
Are
mean,
we close to Françoise?
sorry?
I said always close to Françoise.
Yes, but and to you, Jeanne, because the feeling of no words was something I was struggling with as well. And it's such a horrifying, very moving, tragic story. I'm glad Françoise spoke about shame, because, of course, this would be something to study in a sense with this person. You know, I suppose it's a horribly common experience, but the idea that the person who's the victim of such brutality winds up being ashamed for this is, in a sense, a great injustice. And the issue of, you know, is she particularly vulnerable to shame for some reason, would be something that one might want to learn about in the long run. But I agree too with Françoise that Nadia, your presence was extremely important. And, you know, I began by saying I had no words. Well, you sat with her during silences when neither one of you had words. And it seems to me that was a part of what you offered to her. And the other thing you offered to her, it seems to me, was, among many things actually, but one important thing was when you spoke to her about options, in a sense, you were being with her and helping her bear the weight of this decision. I mean, throughout your work with her, you paid careful attention to her, in a sense, separate authority, her autonomy in a way, her right to make decisions about herself. And even when she might have been inclined to foreclose that by saying she had no options, she actually did, although none of them were wonderful options at all. And you helped her hold the weight of those options, which it seemed to me was very important. Otherwise, that would be something she would have to bear in the future without you. But you know, I admire the work you did with her, and it was extremely moving. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just a small thing. When you were speaking, Jerry, I was thinking, you know, how the two of you, both you and Françoise, have always mentioned the importance of bearing witness. And you just said not bearing witness, but bearing weight to this incredible, moving and tragic story. And I think there's something something that bears the same function, not just to be a witness, but to bear literally the weight of this baby and of that decision.
Yeah.
Marina Bluestein, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nadia, for the really both heartbreaking and heartwarming story. What I was struck with is that I see parallel of your patient, your client's story, and worries about being with this baby for a very short period of time while carrying the baby, but still then asking how the baby is doing or where the baby might be. And then you being with this woman for a short period of time, almost like a two parallel short sort of term processes. And I was thinking that we can do so much good by being with somebody even for a short period of time. For a short time as she spent with the baby while carrying the baby and giving the birth, she was a mother, and there was a good done even with after she parted. And for a short time as you were with her, there was a lot of good done. even though you parted. So just to me, this like parallel track that embedded like in my mind as I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you. Thank you so much.
Angela from California. You mute, Angela. You have to unmute
Oh,
yourself.
sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm from Palo Alto, California. First, I want to say that I was listening to the history, but I also side by side was extremely moved by the way you spoke about your patient. It was so tender. I was surprised at the results of the testing that showed that she wasn't really connected to her baby. And when you hear her personality as it unfolds, you feel that she isn't someone that couldn't be connected. She just had to. It's not that she didn't want to, it was that she couldn't. She had to push this aside for a while, and that it was in the treatment with you that you really, you represented some way of realizing this baby as real and someone that can be born. And in that vein, a baby is not just born to parents, it's born into a community. And so what community would this baby have to be born into, because she's a Ukrainian woman and raped by a Russian soldier, and that staying in that place for 10 days allowed her to feel a community into which the baby could be born and held. And perhaps that's why she was able to leave the baby there, and why she was glad that there was somebody that could adopt the baby. I was also struck by the fact that you said you thought that Russian, that you said that Ukrainian, you did not think Ukrainian was her original language. So then I was wondering what her original language was. Was it Russian or Polish? I don't think you said that. But in any case, when she switched to Russian and you met her there, I was wondering, did you meet her in her original language, or did you, if Russian isn't the one, but Polish is, or some other language, did you at least acknowledge that this is a different language, that I come from a different language? But I was wondering about the therapy being in two languages, in essence, and how important it is for patients to go back to their original language, or to find their roots somehow in the sounds of a language. That wasn't, I didn't know which way it went. That's about all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Do you want to say something about that, Nadia? And what language you spoke with her?
Yes, I would like to say a few things. It was just, she didn't speak Polish, because my last name is also Polish. Probably she spoke Russian, because she didn't speak Polish, because many people speak Russian in those parts. And because her sister went to Russia, but that can be just my assumption. We did not discuss the issue of language, but when I was listening, the response to Oleg Berezyuk's work, I also captured a parallel, that this is hatred towards a person who spoke Russian. And maybe this is what spurs her to speak Ukrainian now, because she hates the person that did that to her, who spoke Russian. Because we didn't discuss the issue of language.
Pina Antinucci from Italy. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Nadia, for this very, very moving account. What I wanted to pick up was the sense that you gave her a breathing space. I was really struck by how often you said she was silent and we breathed. And I was reminded of what yoga teachers do. You know, they breathe together, and in the breathing together, something very important is communicated, a bit like in one of Winnicott's cases, in which he talks about the fact that the patient could breathe in the consulting room. So it is as though even languages are secondary to, in relation to the importance of your being there and being bodily there with her, allowing her to breathe. I was just also wondering whether there is any provision for this for babies, because presumably it's not the only one. And I thought about the, well, you know, the Freud Museum is this event is under the auspices of the Freud Museum. Anna Freud opened up the war nurseries where children could be looked after together by sensitive staff. I wonder if there is anything for the children, for the babies and children, or whether there is only adoption as a destiny for these babies. Thank you again.
Is there, Nadia? Do you know about that? Are there other possibilities than adoption?
Well, they always get discharged to the children's home, and we have two in our city where small children are, stay until they turn 1. It's a really long story, because families wishing to adopt, they are really keen on adopting newborn babies. So many people are interested in newborn babies. Because a newborn baby is usually the fastest one to be adopted. And of course, his abnormality is not that complicated, because there was no pathology of the, let me see. I made a note somewhere. Oh. There's no deformity of the jaw. There's just a split, but the jaw, the bones are intact, and in perspective, the child will be able to swallow and talk. So it's a really good baby to be adopted, actually. But she didn't know that until she arrived in our clinic, because it was her first examination ever, and she came right before her delivery.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course, Françoise.
I was very happy with the intervention on the breathing, because that was when we, I don't know if it's the case now, but when we delivered, in my time, we learned to breathe. That was the major. So it's like you are training together. That's the first, to deliver, but not first the baby, to deliver a relationship, to create a relationship between you two. So there is no language, but there is the birth of language. And the second thing which struck me was that the fact that the baby had that problem turned into more care about this baby. It could have been, oh, this baby, at first it was so negative around that baby, you know, like something you want to get rid of, something. The fact that there was this problem called for care. And I remember the number of times you said there will be good people.
Mhm.
From the desert where she came from, and the shame. The shame is not in rural communities, in a little village, the rape, the woman is responsible for it very often. First, you feel ashamed for what has been done to you, but the neighbors also suspect, and you turn that around, and the shame did not disappear, but the baby could be in the hands of, first you said they are good professionals, then good people, and there was hope, and the window, as you say, your place was a window which enlarged. And I have to say something which struck to when I was a child after the war, my best friend was, I think, the fruit of a rape by a German soldier, Jackie. He was my best friend. I was 4 or 5. He was fair and he looked German, and he had been adopted by rural people where my grandmother had her farm. And those people were so welcoming that we never thought about, him being different or foreign, or he was among us. But we knew he was from, we did not know it was a rape, but we knew he had no parents, only German. So I wish for this little guy to find a community, as Angela said, to grow. And you did a wonderful job, starting with the breathing, but there were words too, not only, mute. You were not mute. And you felt a lot of resonance with her. You went through her trials, always opening a door, and that's a good example you give us.
Jerry.
Yes, it was not the product of a rape, but Erikson was the illegitimate son of a Danish Gentile man and a German Jewish woman. And once the pregnancy occurred, the father would have nothing to do with this woman or the baby. And so Erikson was born, and not too long after his birth, in the course of his mother's taking him to the pediatrician, she fell in love with the pediatrician and married the pediatrician on the condition that they never tell Eric that he was not the biological son. And they went on to have 2 more children, both of them very small and very dark in their complexion. And Erikson wrote that he grew flagrantly tall, was blonde and blue-eyed. So something was wrong with this picture. And so, of course, the only thing he could invent in psychological theory was the identity crisis. And he lived it firsthand. And in fact, he writes that when he went to the public school, they called him Jew. And when he went to Hebrew school, they called him Goy. So from very early on, these contradictory statements about himself was something he had to cope with. And I pick up on that partly because I'm very interested in Pina's question. From one angle, so what happens to this little boy when he's 18 or 19 or 20 and becomes interested in his origins? And, what in a sense, the problem of shame, it seems to me, is moved forward say 20 years, for the family and for this little boy. And so the whole question of what is his identity eventually, and how do the group of children who have come into the world under similar circumstances, how do we think about that? How might we guide society to think about that? It seems to me an interesting and eventually a very important question to take up. And the last thing I want to say at the moment is that, Nadia, you were in a sense remarkable in your crisis care. And I'm very interested in the role that's evolving for you now with this patient in the writing back and forth. And I do wonder if, the fact that you are still there and that you have seen this baby, that in a sense your role is both still ongoingly to some degree as her therapist, but also as a guardian in a certain sense, some sort of guardian in the patient's mind. And it'll be fascinating to learn how that plays out, if there's anything to it.
I know Pina is up next, but I just wanted to say something too about the one notion I didn't include in my little presentation is the idea of the therapon, Françoise, that you always mention. The therapon who's the buddy, as you said, in the funeral rites, and here I think we have a buddy in the birth rites. So where you really have attended to this baby from the beginning, from the day one. And I think it was also very important and very moving that out of your own curiosity, you went back. You went back to the hospital where he was taken care of and inquired on her behalf. So you have that. And maybe at some point, I also have a sense that she'll continue to correspond with you. You have important knowledge to pass on in whatever language. The symbol of the split lip is just incredible, for the two languages that this baby has also been born in. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Jerry. We had that in another case, the case that was presented before you, where the woman also left and then started a correspondence with Oleg. So I think there's a lot to be gained from, a lot to be continued about it. And lastly, I love that this kid is screaming. Everybody knows him. He is special, and as Françoise said, through his disfigurement, he makes himself known. He has that capacity maybe early on to draw attention to himself, and that's incredible, can be an incredible gift. Okay, Pina, you were still wanting to say something too.
Yes, I wanted to say something about shame that both Jerry first and then Françoise picked up on, because shame is not only a terrible predicament. I was reminded of the studies of Jacqueline Amati-Mas. She studied a lot of victims of torture in Argentina. And what she writes about is that the moment in which the victim begins to feel shame is actually a moment of recovery, because with shame, there is a sense of a self that has been hurt, the sense of a skin envelope around the body and around the psyche, and that it's the shrinking of that skin that at least the victim becomes aware of, and therefore it's not completely enmeshed and identified with the oppressor. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that Nadia, you are the first person that she talks to about what happened to her. She's been hiding it from everybody, everything. So you are the depository of the first words, the confession, and the story that she has to tell. So I'm sure that you'll be there for her in her mind.
Home. She was following you. What is your name, Pina?
Pina, yeah.
Pina. Following what you said, well, I was struck also the fact, where do you come from? I have no more home. A village I will not go back. Not only for shame, because it's just wiped out of the map for her, but she finds home in Lviv during 10 days. This home is, like also Angela said, it's a home which will stay, which is not transitory. As you say, it is stay. So do you intend the fact that you go to see the baby, to know what's happening? You are going to write to each other, Nadia? Do you intend to do that?
I would like to explain a little bit. I did not actually see the baby. I had this idea of taking a picture. I had a chance to see the baby, but I didn't. I was thinking about that. Maybe I did not want to stay in that story, to be that involved in that, but I have access to information about the child. I know people who contacted with the baby. And I also think about that. I was thinking whether I could keep doing therapy with this client, but I also need some space for reflection why I was doing that. Because I'm not the only person who offers help, but I would like her to make this choice and to for her to initiate contact, because she can choose some things and she can refuse other things, and this can also change.
But that's also a question we ask ourselves. What drew me to that special relationship? And sometimes we understand long after, not on the spot. Yeah.
Marlene, you want to?
Yeah.
Marlene Radkowski?
Yeah. I also thank you so much for this moving presentation. And what moved me especially was also, like Pina, that you were breathing with this patient. And it came to my mind that normally midwives do breathe with the ladies who give birth to the children. And it's a very intense and elementary situation to be together with the lady who gives birth. And in a special way, you allowed her to give birth to this child. And I was also wondering what you should do further on. Should you keep contact with her? Should you tell her about this little baby and the development and the new parents? And I guess the mother or the patient has to decide if she wants to know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I'm not gonna learn about the adopting parents because we have confidentiality of adoption, that information will not be disclosed to me, and I'm really glad about that.
Okay.
Yeah, Doug Söderström.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I was thinking about destructivity, and that destructivity did not win.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the rape. Rape is kind of saying that there is no relation. There is the destructivity of all relation in a rape, and she was like other people said, she was bearing that destructivity the whole way, but during the pregnancy. But you showed her that I mean, there was the destructivity did not win. That relation still are yes, possible, and like Françoise said, that it's something that we didn't know, that nobody could think that this relation will happen, your relation with that woman. So I think it's a kind of being open to this kind of relation, and saying that, well, she will choose what will happen next. Because you are never going to say, oh, that's what's said also before. You're not saying, oh, that you should do or that you shouldn't do. So I think that the future is that there will be all kind of feelings, but all feelings means that the no feelings will not win in that case, and that's very. I mean, that help us all to think that destructivity will not win in the world. Yes. So thank you.
I can say something after you, Doug, that rape is a weapon of war. So through this story, we cannot help thinking about the massive tool to transform people with this destructivity. And I will just tell you a little story of it was in supervision. Somebody say to me, my mother disappears. So psychological problem. She disappeared 3 or 4 days. And that was a problem. Okay. She was coming from a town in France called Lille, northern France. And recently, a historian I know very well, Annette Becker, wrote about that town, where during First World War, young girls disappeared for 3 or 4 days and came back. And what happened when they came back? They were probably raped as a systematic weapon of war. So after, we don't know what happened. So this is something which is at the same time makes us this session tonight about this evening about the massive what happened to women. And very often it's beyond shame that they keep secret. And even if they can get rid of the fetus, even if they can, whatever the solution, that they don't talk about. That is one of the best secret kept today in your region also.
Well, Françoise, it was, since you are such an expert on coincidence, it's no coincidence we're talking about that tonight. And we were asking Oleksandr Filts to find us somebody to talk about this, because that group that Bernd Günther and Erika Trappel lead, this is where this came up about a week ago, that Oleksandr Filts was, I remember, overwhelmed by the number of women who, as if I understand you correctly, were taken from the Eastern Front to Lviv to bear their children there. So this case we heard tonight, I think, if I understood you correctly, we just have to multiply by, I don't know how many, but by 10 or 20 or 30, I don't know. But it's a real, you know, it's, well, the ones that they have to deal with now in Lviv, but it's maybe not the immediate, but it's definitely a secondary way to enforce an incredible violence and use the women for it. I wonder, Oleksandr, whether you, this was 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, whether you can tell us more for a moment about the situation now, of which, you know, Nadia is an incredible example.
Yes, thank you. I'll just say general things, if I may. Yeah. Okay, I will speak in Ukrainian, so because that's what was a really emotional story, and I have various thoughts going through my head. But concerning this specific question, about 2 weeks ago, it was information from our children's therapist, who is the head of our children's therapy section. And we tried to find out how many of these women there were. We know that they're there, and I can only say things that I may say. And we learned about that with authorities, and they confirmed that there were women like this, and our officials asked us not to spread any more information because these women are still in a are also in the state of collecting evidence of crime. And this information is not available. It's classified so far, they cannot spread it yet. The only thing that when they get referred to our clinic or to our psychotherapists, we will know about specific cases. So the only thing I can say is that there are cases like that, but we were asked not to say how to disclose the details and what happened to the children. It's a really delicate situation. And I also have to stress again that internally, when we talk between ourselves, we are preparing ourselves to cases like that and even more horrible ones. And so that's why we decided to present this case, because she was consulted by my wife at our clinic, right?
Oleksandr, we
Can't hear Oksana.
Yeah. Oleksandr, we have a problem of language right now. It follows us, the 2 languages. We only hear you in Ukrainian. So those of us,
Can you hear me now?
Now
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. Okay, could you maybe
I'm sorry.
no,
Okay.
you do such an incredible job. So if could you
Okay, we were talking about this breathing together again.
okay.
That was Tata. I just wanted to say a few words
Mhm.
about what I felt, because I thought that this simultaneous breathing, I was thinking about some imaginary things. I thought that perhaps this breathing together, because breathing in ancient Greece and in India and Rome had to do with the spirit. It's like getting synchronized in more aspects than in breathing. And it was like Nadia was a guardian angel for this child. And now she remains in this role, and she also gave hope. And the most important thing that this breathing together, of the breathing of a really traumatized person and a healthy person, gave hope to this patient, and she was showing interest in the child. And she did not get rid of that pregnancy, although she could have. And I think that this woman also could open her heart to the child, but she also has, at the same time, she has great hatred towards her rapist. And I don't want to think rationally about this case. I want to think in emotional terms. And I just want to tell you one episode. When I was a young psychiatrist, an older doctor came to see me, and he wanted to have as an outpatient, he wanted ECT given to him because he was depressed, and he was Burat by nationality, and he lived in a small town near Lviv. And he also told me that he was adopted by a Ukrainian family, and he didn't tell me the details, but that was the only thing he told me. And he impressed me as a really intelligent person, really a civilized person and cultured. And when I was thinking about this boy, I thought that maybe God will have mercy on him and he will grow into a really good person, regardless of where he may be coming from genetically. And I would like to think that this child will be lucky in his life. And I think that Nadia has played a really important part of not just a very good container, but also containing the experience of this patient, directing her towards hope. And I think she will be living with this hope. And with regard to these cases, I was told explicitly not to give any further information. So we just decided to leave it at this.
Great.
Now.
Okay. Beatrice.
Yes, I wanted to thank you very much for this presentation. Very moving, and I think the way you were able to open this window for the patient, that you were presenting to her, she did have choices, but you didn't, tell her what she would do, what she should do. She was able to, you asked her, I think, very trying questions. For example, I think I understood you saying, would she want to name the baby? And so I had been wondering actually about the name of this baby and who ended up naming the baby, because that seemed to me an important question and an important act, but sort of it was left in the open. And the fact that, to what extent she wanted to know about how the baby was faring, and that she could have the time to question and to go back and to write and to not write and to be in touch with you or not be in touch with you. Because in my experience, I've worked quite a bit with women who had been raped and had children from rape. And my experience, it takes a very long time for a woman to, if she decides to keep the baby, to develop a relationship, and if she decides not to keep the baby, to do this work of mourning, which is very profound. And so, of course, in that phase of the treatment, the destructiveness will come fully back into the picture. And so that was one comment I wanted to make, that I was very moved by the openness and the way you brought in, you know, these different tests, these questionnaires you had her fill out, because I think this is also a very subtle form of bringing in a third and opening yet another window, that there are obviously other people who have thought about these things, and that there is well, for her, a piece of paper where she could write the answers, but I think it's as a symbolic space to hold the questions and also signify to her that there are other people who have been thinking about this, and that she can put something on paper it's going to stay there, and it can be in the room without having to be further determined, I think. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is that there's a woman in Ukraine, Oleksandr Davoine, who has created a foundation, because she's someone who actually, you can go to YouTube and see a film that she had made about her own history, and which is extremely moving, and where she talks about her history of rape. And she has taken on as a mission to go out to villages and interview women and write down the stories and create some, she's acting as a witness, but she also creates documentation about all the rapes that have happened in Ukraine, and they're massive, as we know. But I think it's also important for everybody to know that there are people like Oleksandr Davoine who have worked on testimonies, and not only for human rights documentation purposes, but also for the women to be able, if they want, to have their stories collected and written down, and that this kind of creating of public knowledge that this is happening, and that women can come out of the isolation, and they're not alone, and there are many, many women who have experienced this and who have spoken about it, and have spoken to each other about it, and who have gone abroad and shared their stories. And so this is actually, right now, I think, pretty public knowledge in Ukraine for whoever wants to know. And I think that's important that we have this reference.
I think, Beatrice, you point out, which is something that Jerry also always refers us to the importance of the symbolic, right? I mean, that there is we don't know the name of the baby, but hopefully he will be named soon. There is the inscription in the test, something where she had to put down her name. There is some sort of, it seems to me, some symbolic net that you provided besides the maternal breathing care for her from the very beginning. And something I think we haven't completely addressed yet in it. It seems there's also some hope that she may actually dare to be in another relationship, because she apparently told you, if I understood you correctly, that there is a man in Poland that she likes, but she's not yet ready to get involved with. I mean, I found that astounding so quickly after what is it?
I'm sorry. a man that likes her.
Yeah, a man that likes her, but she's not completely off. She says she wants to take some time, but she can bear the interest. She doesn't go, she doesn't defend against it completely. And you also said that when she came back home, she was hugging her son for the first time again in a long time, in a more, I think, emotional way. So there's even, her libidinal drives enlivened again. So I think that's a good news. And another thing I thought was very interesting too, early in the story, is the guts and the courage she had to take a ferry to Russia. I mean, her flight back to Poland, I thought was amazing, and overcoming the inspecting eyes of the Russian soldier who asked for a father. I loved that, not knowing which father he really meant. So it seems like she's tough. She has a lot of life despite all the destructiveness that unfortunately happened to her. So thank you.
Jeanne, could I, before we hear from Angela, could I ask Beatrice to put in the chat function the name of that foundation?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yes, I can do that, yeah.
Angela. We can't hear you.
I guess, since you brought up the son, because I've been thinking about him for quite a while now, in terms of memory and generational transmission, he notices that that there's something different, and she says that she's gaining weight, which is not exactly a lie. It's an aspect of pregnancy, but perhaps as much as she could say to him. So he has in his memory something about this, that at what point will he remember it, and will she, I think she has the capacity at some point to bring that up in the future, but I wondered if the presenter had any thoughts about the son during this, and how she thinks that might unfold in relation to how much she talked or didn't talk about the son.
Nadia, do you want to say something?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was confused a little bit with the technology. Well, we didn't really talk about her son during sessions, besides, except that she said she was missing him very much. I was just picking up what she gave me. It was really spontaneous, something that was really on the surface. That's what we discussed. But I suppose that this may have some continuation, and if it does, we will definitely discuss that. But it can also happen that this will not be continued, and I also assume that this may be the case. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but I was sorry.
I wanted to say that, well, first of all, thank you, Nadia.
Zoriana, yeah, okay.
That was a really nice experience to hear, but I have a fantasy that she will not call you up because of trauma. because it's a trauma of choice between her own son. And I would like to say that sexual violence that is happening here in Ukraine, a lot of is written about it. And for us, it's when the military could not take Kyiv. There were a lot of raped women in Bucha and Irpin. And they are really silent about this. And when the enemy cannot achieve something in warfare, I think this is some perverse form of conquest, devaluation of people, because the psychological state of the nation is really important. To destroy spirituality, to destroy the continuation. You have no right to live. That's what they tell us. We're taking away this right from you. And it's true what Oleksandr says. You can talk a lot about this. I can say many things because I have 5 women. I've worked with 5 women and none of them was raped, but they're really scared. And they would visit dermatologists, but these were cases that they didn't want to talk about. It's something we were afraid of this monster inside of us. This monster left something inside of us. And we're not ready to face it yet. And 2 weeks ago, when we met up, I gave one example. When a girl saw her mother, her pregnant mother and her little sister being raped in front of her. And we're gathering this information really carefully. And I think there will be a lot of studies and research on that. And I try to write a journal. But we get this message from our authorities about hushing up, because the journalists because before I read about this woman called Katerina. The women do not go to court, to the Hague court. The women who are in this legal sphere, and when evidence is being gathered about the genocide of Ukrainian nation, this information cannot be open. The information from these women. Like this story with Nadia's patient and with other patients who give their permission to reporters and are ready to tell their stories. And another thing I would like to tell you, that with such traumatizing events, as a psychotherapist, I can say that, because I live in Lviv, and the language does not really matter in cases like that. Know a little aspect of this. Before the war and during the war, I have a client who lives in Hague, and he's Belarusian. And 2 months ago, he didn't speak any Ukrainian. He spoke Russian and English, and I had therapy in Russian with him. And now he brought this surprise to me. After 2 months, we start a session and he starts speaking Ukrainian, because trauma does not break us apart. It unites us. It's something on the feeling level, on the skin level. How can I tell you about the air raid alerts? You just have to experience it. You have to hear it. This alarm is inside of us. It's the same, and we can feel it. It's a feeling. It's our feelings and sensations. It's something that unites us. And the language issues are not really, do not usually come into play. It doesn't really matter. Thank you. You've done a wonderful job. You're also a page of history of Ukrainian psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, of our meetings, and thank you very much from the Ukrainian psychotherapists.
So Rania, thank you very much. Thank you for giving us
At the same time, there is no words, as you say, it's pure experience, and people who have not this experience cannot. And at the same time, you tell us about it. And that's very important and so precious. What you say, what unites you, is linked through experiences of women raped and terror from the planes and the alarms and the alert, what you live every day. And at the same time, it's without words, but you tell us. So, thank you for that.
I would like to leave because we have to really end in a few minutes. Maybe the last words to you, Nadia. I mean, I think a lot of people were very much affected by your case, by your work, how you worked with this woman under these incredibly difficult circumstances, and kept also your stance in a way similar to this woman. Do you want to say what went on inside of you, and what maybe you can take home to your home tonight from all the thoughts you heard tonight?
Yes, I definitely am experiencing something on the inside, but I'm not ready to even describe it in words yet. I think that I was really struck by this story, and it's also struck everyone who was involved in it. But it's just so painful that I just didn't have a chance to respond to that, even this in my small circle. And what happened now, I shared it between all of us, and in the chat I can see there are 70 participants right now, and I've sort of taken off a part of that weight that this experience left in me. And another thing, something I have to stay with. There are some things I will have to stay with and think about and understand, but I'm really grateful for your feedback, and this was really important. I became even more important for myself in this respect, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Marlene, you want to have a last word?
Yes, I would like to thank especially you, Jeanne, because you were the one who initiated those very, very important meetings. You know, you were the one, and you do a wonderful moderation, and we are all, I guess, very, very grateful for this opportunity to be together with the Ukrainian friends and colleagues and all over the world. I mean, it's such a wonderful sad and moving opportunity to share all of this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really struck tonight. For one, how many friends of mine participated tonight, from Angela in California and Pina in Italy and Jerry in Massachusetts. It's incredible. It's really incredible what we've been able to put together. And the cases are, I think, I know Françoise, I see her, we think a lot about it, right? I mean, we learn also so much from you. So thank you, Marlene. I just want to remind you again that we have to change, for those maybe who weren't there right at the beginning, we had to change the date of the next meeting because of the national holiday here. And so we'll meet on November 2nd again. And I'm very confident that Oleksandr is going to hold another important and moving case. But my many thanks to you, Nadia, and Oksana again and Jerry and Françoise and everyone. Thank you very much.
And to Peter too, who makes this possible.
To Peter, yeah, to Peter and Eva in the back, absolutely.
Eva,
yes. Allow yourself to be seen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We always remain invisible, those two.
Thank you, Zoriana.
Okay, thank you,
Good night.
Zoriana. Yeah. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.